Hello, Year 8. This is our second session on this extract from Oliver Twist that we read last session. So today I'm going to go through the questions, extract, so you can compare to what ideas you had, what you think about it. And it would be good if you could improve what you've done and show that to me through taking pictures like you're doing on Show My Homework. So the first activities were these thinking and research. So I asked you to have a think about famous orphans. A lot of heroes in literature are orphans, so how many can you think of? So I gave you a few here. So we've got Harry Potter, James from James and the Giant Peach, got Batman. So who else did you think of? So some of you had some good ideas, like Mowgli from the Jungle Book, superheroes like Superman. There's lots of our heroes who are actually orphans. Like even think about Lord of the Rings. We've got Frodo Baggins. We've got more dull characters like Sophie from the BFG and young man, can't remember his name, from The Witches. George and his marvelous medicine is his grandma, isn't he, in the book? So Roald Dahl obviously uses orphans a lot there. So Peter Pan, Snow White, and then we've got more literary characters. I don't know if you've heard of Jane Eyre, or there's characters in Wuthering Heights that are orphans too, or foundlings. And then some books you may have read, like the Alex Rider series, he's an orphan, or Lyra from the Dark Materials. She starts the book as an orphan. I won't spoil it if you don't know. So why do you think orphans are popular characters? So some of you have some interesting ideas, like we feel sorry for them, so we want to see them overcoming adversity, which I think is a really good idea. That emotion that we feel we want to see them do good. So bad things have happened to them, and we want to go on that journey with them. It's where they're overcoming obstacles. I think there's a lot of freedom with an orphan, isn't there? Because they aren't necessarily constrained by to live with a family and having their parents telling them what to do. So the center of the story becomes all about the orphan and their adventure and their choices, which is appealing. And I think there's a bit of that escapist fantasy as well, isn't there, that some people have about changing their life. Not that people don't want to have their parents, but that freedom that you'd have without parents as a young person is exciting, isn't it? You know, after a day of it, it'd probably be terrifying, but the idea of it is exciting. So, orphans, very good research, those of you that did that. And then this extract is set in a workhouse. So, what were workhouses and what function did they have in society around this time, so the mid 1800s? So, workhouses were places that people stayed if they didn't have lodging or accommodation or work themselves, so they couldn't afford the rents to live somewhere with their job. They had nowhere to go, they were destitute, so they would go into a workhouse. So there's lots of stories about how awful they were, horrible places, which I'm sure they would have been to many people. But you got a bed and you got food, um, but you had to work for it. So a lot of it is the idea of them does seem a bit like a prison because you had no choice but to go there as like a last resort. So obviously in today's society we have social security, so we have governments and local councils that have services and provide vulnerable, the poor people with social housing, with reduced rents and things like that, and given support and help. Obviously, that doesn't always work, as we have homeless people still, don't we, in society? But obviously, living today is a much nicer, much more compassionate um, society than the Dickensian London that we get in Oliver Twist and other stories from him about how they feel about the poor. So workhouses, good and bad. They were a last resort. They were a bit like a prison. Like men and women, husbands and wives, would be separated within the workhouses and things like that. So it was definitely not a place you wanted to go. So questions. So let's have a look at our questions with the extract. So explain 2 reasons why Oliver asks for more, even though it is a dangerous thing to do. So within the text, it's this first section. So here we have, child as he was desperate with hunger and reckless with misery. So the best answers explored the words desperate and reckless. So he was desperate with hunger and reckless with misery. So when you're desperate, you will do lots of things that you wouldn't normally do if you weren't desperate. And if you're reckless, you're willing to take risks. So that desperation, because he's so hungry, and his willingness to take risks because he's so sad and miserable, because he's so hungry, because he's in the workhouse. So if you explain those 2 words, that would have been a very good answer. And some of you talked about the boys winking and nudging him, so a bit of peer pressure and wanting to impress his friends. So that would have been um, a good thing to talk about. So question 2. How does Dickens use language to prove that the master is in great shock when Oliver asks for more? So back here, so this is Oliver. Please, sir, I want some more. And this is the section we should look at. Think about the master. So, a fat, healthy man, he turned very pale. He gazed in stupefied astonishment on the small rebel for some seconds, and then clung for support to the copper. The assistants were paralysed with wonder, the boys with fear. "What?" said the master at length in a faint voice. So there's several things there, haven't we? That he turned very pale. So why do people turn pale when they are shocked? It's a physical reaction. I'm not a scientist. A great shock when your body is shocked. All of your physical reaction is that your blood, your vital organs, so away from your fingers and toes and maybe your face, to go to your like heart and lungs and stuff in case you need to fight or run away. So people do turn pale when they're shocked. So there we have a physical reaction. And then we've got stupefied astonishment. So he gazed. So he's just stared. And being stupefied means like stunned. We talked about Harry Potter earlier, didn't we? And there's a stupefy spell, isn't it, where it stuns people, just makes them freeze. So he's frozen and gazing. He just can't believe what he's heard. And then when he does come to, he clings. Then clung to support. So he grabs onto something to hold onto it, like he's going to faint. So he's turning pale, he's stunned, and he's going to faint. So he has to grab something. And then it talks about a faint voice. When he actually does speak, his voice is faint. So there we have some words and descriptions, language, which prove the master is in shock. So if you got any of those, then you had a good answer. So number 3, what physical action does the master take against Oliver? So this section here. So what does the master do? So aims a blow at Oliver's head with the ladle. So he's ladling out the gruel, the porridge substance, to the boys in the workhouse. And then with what he dishes out the food, he swings it at Oliver and then pinions his arms. So it sort of grabs hold of him so he can't move. I think almost like your arms are grabbed from behind. So he can't move at all. So he's quite violent, isn't it? So aims a blow with the ladle, grabs his arms, and then shouts. He shrieks for the beadle, so for someone to come and support him, an authority figure. And then, how does Dickens show Oliver being treated as though he's done something almost criminal? So, question 4. So, what shows he's like a criminal? So, his arms being pinioned, almost like he's handcuffed. And then here we go. Oliver was ordered into instant confinement. So rather than going back with the other boys, he's shut up on his own like he's a prisoner. So like he's a criminal. All of this, remember, because he said these words up here. Please, sir, I want some more. And then what does it mean to be taken off the hands of the parish? So question 5. So we talked about the some of the glossary words. So the parish is an area looked after by the church. So the workhouses, well, the church used to look after the poor in society. So I talked about the government earlier and social services. They used to, and currently, who looks after the poor. And obviously, we have a lot of charities in our society as well that do a lot of good, and that our society relies on charity. It used to be charities, and the parish used to be the churches that looked after the poor. So the priests and the people in charge of the churches would keep people off the streets, look after homeless people, get them jobs, get them food, get them clothes, things like that. So the parish to be off the hands of the parish. So rather than the parish having to pay for Oliver's upkeep, so the food and clothes that he is given while he's in the workhouse, they are offering a reward of £5 to anybody who would take Oliver off the hands. So obviously he's such a handful because he stood up and asked for more food. They're offering to pay someone £5 to come and take Oliver away from the workhouse. And if you know the story, he is taken off the hands of the parish by an undertaker, so someone who deals with funerals, because they think Oliver has a sad little face, so he could walk and look cute dressed in black with a hat on in front of funerals. I think it's particularly children's funerals, because remember it was Victorian times and a lot of disease and death around, so Oliver was going to hopefully have a career working, being looked after by the family of an undertaker. It doesn't quite work out that way. So, question 5. And then, can you pick out anywhere Dickens has included comedy and humour in the scene? So, lots of you didn't find it funny. I think maybe because of the violence in it, you couldn't see any comedy in it. But it is, a lot of Dickens has a lot of humour in it, like these characters. So the master himself, lots of you picked out those that did see any funny elements, was the master was a fat, healthy man. So you thought that was funny. But in a poor society, being fat was a luxury, wasn't it? So you're not going to be unhealthy if you were fat in Victorian times. You're more likely to be unhealthy if you're too skinny because you don't have enough food. So it wasn't thought of like quite the same. So that's sort of why it's funny, I think. So we've got this idea of this big fat man, the master. He's in power, and because it's the situation that's funny. So you've got this small boy who says politely that he'd like some more gruel, and the master, this big fat man, the way he reacts is funny because it's ridiculous, because he's so shocked by the temerity. So the cheek of this young orphan, how dare he ask for more? Yeah, so the irony of this fat, healthy man being outraged, disgusted, like that this little boy would like another spoonful of food, is funny because it's so ridiculous, and the reverse idea, this fat man, he's fat because his wages are paid by the parish, and they should be looking after everyone in the parish if they are good in this time Christian people. But obviously he's got too much, he's fat, and these boys are really hungry, so they don't have enough. They're being fed gruel. And if in the story there's descriptions of what the other people, the other adults in the workhouse that work there, all the food that they have, and it's definitely much nicer than gruel. Um, so there's comedy there in this situation. This fat man clinging on to the pot because he's so disgusted by this poor little boy, and then again developing that, um, aiming a blow. Now you could argue that that's not funny. It's like child abuse, isn't it? But the idea, um, it doesn't land. It doesn't actually hit him with the ladle. You can imagine he's so shocked. He misses, so that would be comedy. Yeah, and that he has to, this big fat man having to shout for help because of this one small child. All this ridiculousness builds up, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's why it's funny, this ridiculous situation. And this joke up here, so this section, I don't think anyone would have picked that bit out. So a long grace was said over the short commons. So the gruel was served out. So that is the commons. So the commons is like the common food that everyone had. So that would be the gruel. So how long did it take them to eat it? Less time than it took for them to say a prayer, grace, thanking God for the food that they have been given. So there's again irony there, and Dickens is putting humour in there. So a long grace over the short commons. So how long does it take to eat a few mouthfuls of porridge? Not very long. How long is the prayer then made to say and thanks for it? Longer than it takes for them to eat it. So that's it's a bit of a dark humour there, isn't it? But it is there as well. And then this idea again, it just carries on. Like, what a criminal! The fact that they're willing to pay for him to be taken off of their parish's hands because they can't deal with this boy because he's such a, what's the word they use? The small rebel. Yeah, so there's there, isn't there? This rebel because he's going against the rules of. So I hope you enjoyed learning about this extract, this famous scene. And humour is often something that young people like yourselves find it tricky to spot in texts. So when you have extracts and when you have text like this, always have a look. Are there any humorous sections? It's always a good tip to look out for. Not everything is really serious. Most people like finding the dark and violent, serious things, but sometimes there's a smile in there as well. Okay, so like I said, I hope you enjoyed that. Write down all your ideas and take a photo and send them to me when you've done it. Thank you very much.